Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. news, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Podcast. Welcome to the show where Nate gets picky about all of the co-host microphones right before the show, and we go live late.
So picky.
Well, I mean, Jason had like a vacuum machine or vacuum cleaner going on in the background, so we had to fix that.
That's a slight exaggeration.
He's like, I'm not going to talk now. I hate
My microphone is so sensitive; it was picking things up and making it sound like a vacuum cleaner. So I just told it to stop being so sensitive.
Yay! And you actually
which probably offended it, and I'm probably going to go into jail or something for it.
Don't be so sensitive, right? It's going to take you to human resources now. You're going to have to go to sensitivity training. Wait, they don't call it that anymore, do they? It's
then they'll watch this video and they'll see. I'll go to HR. They'll read me the whole complaint. They'll watch this video. They'll see I'm drinking, and it's just going to compound itself. And pretty soon, I'm not going to be able to podcast anymore.
You're screwed, man.
I think so.
He was
Game over, man. Game over.
Game over, man. I need a sound clip of that game over. Game over, man. Game over.
Not close enough.
You know?
Yeah, aliens.
Yeah, it was from Aliens. Okay.
It's from Aliens.
Yes, the plural one.
Good.
The action movie.
Now I'm getting picky because
I
I noticed that I made Mark's camera smaller than Jason's, and now it's gonna bother me the whole show.
Hey, good news, guys. Apparently on Twitch we sound like chipmunks.
What?
I read the J Scar says we sound like chipmunks.
You know what? We had weird issues with Twitch last time too.
But it says YouTube is. It says J-Scar says YouTube is fine.
Well, I'm just gonna throw this out there. They're coming from the same source.
J-Scar, the only way to fix this is to shout Alvin at the top of your lungs.
Yes. Now I want to know why. I'm not gonna go. We're not gonna live troubleshoot. I promise. Mark, hey, I'm joined by two of our co-hosts tonight. Say hi to Jason and Mark.
Who?
Hi, Jason.
I'm just gonna try to not think about Twitch right now.
Hi, Mark.
How you doing, man?
So strange that we sound like chipmunks.
The two of us survived Nate's pickiness and actually ended up going live.
Yeah, neither of you rage quit right as we were about to go live. That's great of you. Really good of you.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting to be live before I went to rage quitted.
Okay. Alt Q, man. Alt Q.
I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't have an alt button on my computer.
No?
It's a Mac.
Oh, Command Q then.
Yeah, see, no alt button.
Right. I missed the Command Q.
Did you see all that, podcast listeners?
Right. They didn't.
Guess this means I have to monitor the YouTube chat closer, because I just told everybody on Twitch to go to YouTube if they don't like the way our voices sound. All right, so
I thought you had the channel federated together.
Tell the interns to go troubleshoot it.
Okay, I'll tell the interns to go troubleshoot it. And no, the chat is unfortunately not multi-chat. It kind of is, but kind of isn't. You know what?
Barking dog. I hear a barking dog.
The dog is
Not
out.
mine.
Guys,
your microphone sounds like a barking dog.
We're just gonna have to cancel the show tonight. It's just good night. Wait here.
Well, that's okay because in about an hour, one of my dogs generally gets into her barking rage. So there's a universal constant.
Your dogs aren't on the other side of the wall from behind the podcast.
No,
so.
But I can hear her, and I'm on the complete opposite end of the house and one floor down. So, yeah, It's frustrating when she gets into one of those friggin' moods.
I don't think I knew you had dogs.
Oh, I have dogs.
I've never heard them on the podcast, so I was not aware.
They're small.
I've met them. They're small.
Oh, so they yip.
Yippy.
They don't actually bark.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. The yip carries more.
It goes.
Dogs bark, cats yip.
Wait, cats yip?
Yip makes it sound like it's quiet.
They meow too.
Cats don't yip. Anyway,
it's not if you don't hurt your back picking it up, it's not a dog.
What do the
I guess
fox
that's
say
valid.
though? They're dogs.
There's a song about this.
There is.
Anyway, we're here to have a show, right? I think we're gonna have a show.
We are having a show. It's very entertaining so far.
Yeah, it is. It is, right? Right. So we promised a show about CGroups, and CGroups. Those are those things that fish swim in, right? In the ocean.
No.
No.
Not at all.
Okay. Are you about to school us on CGroups?
I'm finished here, man. All right.
All right. So I don't know how much of an introduction Mark really needs here, but Mark does this great technical presentation, like a technical lab, really, on CGroups, and we've gone back and forth about offering that to Iron Sysadmin listeners. That's like somehow, right? And we just never got around to it. So, for lack of a better topic tonight,
yeah,
I thought
we're just gonna have a conversation.
Right. I thought it might be fun to just talk about CGroups. Maybe this may even lead to people being interested in learning more about CGroups, and then we can run your lab, Mark. Right. So,
yeah, that's fine.
I asked Mark if he'd be able to talk about CGroups tonight, and here we are. We're going to talk about CGroups. So I'm just going to hand it off to you, Mark. Go ahead. Talk about CGroups, and we will ask you very intelligent questions and not heckle at all.
All right.
Right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Nate doesn't speak for me.
Yeah. And I didn't think he I didn't think he did.
So what's a CGroup, Mark?
What's a CGroup? Okay. So CGroup is short for control group. But let's like step back for a moment, right?
Okay.
Because we can talk about random technologies, but what I always try and tell people when we're talking about a computer topic, about a particular tool or particular methodology or whatever, you really need to ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish, right? And in the case of a C group, what problem are control groups trying to solve? So for those of you who are listening who have never heard of C groups or control groups, especially if you're primarily a Windows background or really old school Linux background, control groups are in the performance tool set. They are a way to manage and also report upon performance on a modern Linux computer. What has really happened, if you look at the way Linux computers have advanced over the past couple of decades, and this is funny because in computers everything old is new again, right? When I was young, a computer was a huge device that filled a room. Well, maybe they were a little smaller when I was young. You had PDP-11s and stuff. I was born in '66, just to give some
context.
What the hell's the word? Some context. Thank you. And so, back then when I was a Ute, computers were essentially mainframes, right? And in there, people would talk about, I have time sharing on a computer. The idea that the mainframe would split time between users and the jobs on it because they were too expensive for just a single person to be using, right? They just cost too much money. In the 70s, when personal computers hit, they were significantly weaker, right? I mean, they could fit on a desk, but they couldn't do as much. And so when you look at your Apple II, you look at your original IBM PC run on DOS, that computer is basically doing one thing at a time, right? A single person's using it at a time, and it's running a single application at a time. And honestly, if you stay in the use case of most home users, even though modern Windows is fully capable of multitasking, and it does multitask stuff even if you don't realize it, most of the time on a personal computer, you're doing one thing at a time. Whether it's your PC on your desk, whether it's your gaming console, whether it's even your phone, right? Your focus is on one primary task. And yeah, there might be things running in the background, but for the most part, it's doing one thing at a time. In the enterprise world, it's a little bit different. When I started with Linux in 2004 at the Linux group at Merck, Linux was running on Dell pizza boxes, and we were running web servers. And while each server would have multiple websites on it, it was basically they were running Apache and then a couple of utilities. And when the web group wanted to stand up a new set of websites, they'd buy more physical hardware. We'd rack them and stack them, lay down the OS, and bring up more instances of Apache. But you still essentially had, Linux could multi-user. More people could log in, more than one person at a time. But for the most part, you were still running basically one thing per Linux server, one real application, right? Now, at that time, Linux had inherited some of the tooling and some of the concepts from other Unixes. You guys might be familiar with the concept of nicing a process. We're on a multi-user box, or on not even multi-user, on a box that can run more than one program at a time. For Linux, you've always been able to like re-nice a process, where nice is a scale from +20, which is the least priority, to -20, which is I demand as much CPU as I possibly can get. And you could reweight the processes to try and share the resources on the box. But I don't know if you guys ever messed with that. It was never really straightforward, and it was tough to do persistently.
Nice. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it was always it always felt kind of janky to me.
It was it was a very point in time thing. This thing is just like bringing my machine to its knees. Let's put it through nice. Let's nice it. And all of a sudden, it's not as well. It's not as not nice.
Right, and more importantly, like re-nicing a process still couldn't stop it from essentially gulping down all the CPU on a box by mistake and freezing the machine, right?
Yeah, essentially, if I understand it correctly, what it would do is it gave other processes priority above that one. So other processes could do things, but this one could still overrun the box.
Yeah, it could still happen. It was moderately rare, but point being that for quite a few years in Linux, you had tooling that was kind of legacy, right? And you had user limits, which you could set user limits for shell sessions, and if users were clever, they could get around them. Oh, I can only open this many files as well. I can open up a new bash set, whatever. You could kind of sometimes get around that stuff. And what was happening as Linux evolved, you started to see virtualization happening on the x86 platforms. A lot of that at the enterprise level was VMware, but there were other players too, right? You had some open source variants of virtualization. But the idea was you were taking this one physical box and you were slicing it into smaller computers. And that the hypervisor would basically manage each of these virtual machines as its own set of resources, and that sometimes got a little flaky. As time went on, you then ran into containers, like Docker hit the scene. See, Jason, I mentioned Docker.
You happy
and
now?
Containers are essentially, if virtual machines were slicing up one piece of physical hardware into smaller systems, Docker containers, were taking that a step further. You could isolate applications inside of their own containers inside of an operating system and slice it up even more. In other words, you had the enterprise IT world consolidating multiple applications onto pools of hardware, and you needed a way to share the resources more effectively. All right? So there's our problem we're trying to solve. Linux was based on a lot of the multi-user Unix concepts, but the tooling to really share resources on Linux was not great. So Google 2006. Two engineers there, Paul Minaj and Rohit Seth, they started a project called Process Containers. That was their original name for the feature. And they based it on a Solaris feature called Zones. So like most things on Linux, an older Unix brother did this shit first. So Solaris had Zones in 2004, which featured resource groups, which essentially provided C group functionality. And we'll talk about what C groups actually look like in a few minutes. But Paul and Rohit were like, Google. If you really look at what Google was doing, they built their business on building like farms of systems and whatnot, and like just distributing workloads and trying to manage those workloads. Out of Google came the work on Kubernetes. Docker came up with the idea of putting stuff in a container, and the guys at Google came up with the idea of managing these containers with Kubernetes, which of course led to OpenShift. But these process containers, which started as an internal project, got renamed to control groups, or C groups for short, and landed in the Linux kernel in 2007, about a year after they developed them. Right? And that kernel version, for those of you who care about such things, was kernel 2.6.24. That was the very first Linux kernel that featured C group controllers.
Ah, the good old days.
Yeah, the good old days, right? So since I work for Red Hat, very open about that, right? I talk about things in terms of Red Hat, but you can say CentOS as well. You first saw C groups appear in RHEL 6. And so that's all right. If you were running kernel 2.6.24 or higher, you had control groups, right? Control groups are essentially built into the kernel itself. Now it's up to the distributions to provide tooling around control groups so that non-programmers especially could use them. And so in RHEL 6, Red Hat shipped libcgroup and tooling so that you could actually set up C groups without having to poke around virtual file systems by hand and mess with, the individual files in there. But the tooling was not enabled by default. So even though RHEL 6 had C groups, out of the box, you needed to, if you wanted to use them effectively, you had to install the C group tooling and enable it, and then start setting up C group rules. So out of the box, RHEL 6 didn't take advantage of C groups. So at the most popular C group controllers, right? The C groups are kernel controllers. The ones we really have talked about through the years that have always been available and the most useful, starting with RHEL 6, were controllers for the CPU, for memory, and for I/O. There is a network C group controller, but that one a lot of people aren't comfortable messing with because networks tend to be fragile enough as it is, and wrapping the C group around that, you can do it, but it sometimes leads to not a great experience. And the idea here is that when you launch a process on RHEL 6, you could put that process inside of a control group. And once that process was inside of a control group, that process and all of its children would be in that control group. And that's a very important concept. Because if you put a user session into a control group, that user can never exceed the limitations you set on them, even if they log into multiple bash sessions.
So that hungry user can't.
They can't get around it. What if you put a user in a C group? Suddenly they're there. That's where they are.
And you said that persists across several bash sessions, right? So if it's somehow tied to their login shell, if I SSH in 27 times and I'm limited to, I don't know, a gig of memory, all of those shells can only consume up to that gig I've been limited to?
That is correct. That works out of the box on RHEL 7. We're going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
You'd have to set up the ruling properly in RHEL 6 to make that happen.
But nobody should be running RHEL 6 anyway.
I know, but this is a little bit of a history lesson.
Yes.
Too. Let old Unclemarc drink his bourbon and give you the history lesson a little bit.
Do you need a rocking chair and an old dog?
I can rock my chair, and I got.
Where's your cane?
Friends in the office. Where's my cane?
Got a walker?
I don't have a cane or a walker, sadly.
Do you have comfortable slippers to put on?
I do have comfortable slippers. They're right over here.
Corncob
office
pipe.
slippers. So so the idea here was with the controller. So CPU, let's talk a little bit about what the controllers do, right? So the CPU can actually do two different things. The CPU C group controller. You can set up what are called CPU shares, or you can set up CPU quota, or you can do a combination of the two. All right. So the concept of a share is, think of it as a pie. Um, all the CPU time on the system would be a pie. And if you have the Nate process and the Jason process,
wait, what kind of pie are we talking about? Because this matters.
It can matter. We're going to say it's apple, just for the sake of.
Oh, I'm not interested. You can have it all, Nate.
Awesome. I love apple pie.
Cherry, blueberry.
I hate cherry pie.
Both of those are okay. Blueberry, I like.
Okay, we can agree on blueberry. We can fight over blueberry.
Good. Like a chocolate pudding pie.
How about Boston cream pie?
Pizza.
Boston cream works.
Boston cream pie. There we go.
All right. I'll be right back. I'm hungry.
So with CPU shares, you're given an arbitrary number as your shares, and the default in RHEL 7 was 1024. What's special about 1024, by the way?
That's up 2 to the 8th, right?
It's a power of 2.
It's a power of 2. Okay.
It's a power of 2.
I was looking for more meaning there. You just wanted a power of 2. All right, we're good.
No, it was a little bit of a trick question, right? So most CPU shares are given in powers of 2. So your default would be 1024. So if you've both logged on to or if you both wanted to eat the pie and you're both eating as much as you can, you would both had 1024 shares, you would both be able to eat half of the pie. Now, let's say that I like Jason better. I'm the sysadmin. And I give him 2048 shares. And Nate, you're stuck at 1024. Jason could eat twice as much pie as you.
That's not okay.
So, yeah, it's okay. You'll be fine.
It's not okay. What if I like the pie?
Yeah, but if you do it properly, you're not going to know that there's more pie available to you. So
that's valid.
Screw you.
Yeah, you'll be blissful. So with CPU shares, what happens? Forget the pie analogy for a moment. As long as the system is not at underload, in other words, the CPU is not maxed out, every process can use as much processors as they want, right? Regardless of your share setting. Once the system hits 100%, the share setting kicks in. And so in your case, for every 2 processor cycles Jason would get, Nate would get 1. Because Jason has 2048.
This is not fair. Where's the equality?
We could have done the same thing, by the way, by keeping Jason at 1024 and dropping Nate to 512. So as a system administrator, what I can do is I can set my CPU shares, I can tune them however I'd like. And what I'm saying is that under load, this is what the system's going to look like. I want to always make sure that my database process has this much CPU relative to all the other processes while the system is under load, for instance. But what the CPU controller does is it prevents something that used to happen quite a bit sometimes on RHEL 6. How many of you ever had the RHEL 6 system where it was the SSH daemon was so CPU starved you couldn't even log in?
Yep.
Yeah. That generally doesn't happen on RHEL 7 unless there's like a catastrophic unless the system is panicking. Because the CPU shares ensure that everybody gets some processor. It's just balanced.
Might be slow processor, but you get some, is the point.
You get some.
Yeah.
Now, quota works in a different manner. CPU quota says this is the maximum amount of CPU a process can get even if nothing else is going on. And quota can be higher than 100% if you've got a multi-core machine. So if you set CPU quota to 400%, that means you're limited to a total of 4 processors on the box. You can use up to 4 complete processors worth of attention. So one of my TAM customers on RHEL 6, we solved a real world problem he was having with the CPU controller under RHEL 6. Their InfoSec team demanded they run this malware scanner, and it would kick on periodically. Well, when it would kick on, it would gulp CPU like a fat kid goes after cake or pie. It would burn so much CPU that the Oracle agents on the boxes, this was Oracle RAC, the monitoring agents that asked the cluster, "Are you still alive?" would get CPU starved. What happens, Jason, when the monitoring agent doesn't respond to its buddies in the cluster?
It wakes up the engineers, but when the engineers notice that it's Oracle, they go back to sleep.
Right. And it wakes up the engineers because it fences the node, and suddenly you've got production downtime. So this security scanner, which was put on to make things better, was actually causing production outages. So what we did is we created CGroup rules under RHEL 6 for the customer, and we put this agent in its own CGroup, and we're like, you get 40% of a single core maximum. That's what you're allowed to use ever. And the crashing stopped. It went away.
See, now, what you should have done is you should have limited Oracle and let the malware scanner do its job, because that's more important.
The malware scanner has been
what?
Running endlessly ever since, because, unless it takes up the entire CPU, it can never finish.
Actually finishes.
That sounds like somebody else's problem.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
No, but we found that giving the malware scanner 40% CPU gave it enough CPU to do its job in a timely manner, but also didn't fence the box.
Well, that's good. That's good. Because, I mean, realistically, right? So as a sysadmin, I'm woken up at 2 a.m. because Oracle just got fenced because that freaking InfoSec team, their agent took down the machine. My first indication is I'm going to uninstall your malware agent, right? So it's great that you were able to find a solution that not only kept the production workload up and running, but also kept the information security folks happy enough because their agent is still able to do its job. And really, at the end of the day, theoretically, keeps everybody safer because it's actually scanning for malware.
But let's get real. The InfoSec folks are never happy.
Oh, you're right.
Well, sorry.
Malware scanner.
I kid. I do security too. I'm allowed to make fun.
Yeah, was it Norton? Because then it would be integrated with a crypto miner. That's what J Scar's asking.
Yeah, it was McAfee. Anyway, Admiral, it was Khan. He put creatures in our bodies. No, it was McAfee. Yeah. Hi. So, but that was a real world problem, and that was solved under RHEL 6. Now, with RHEL 7, one of the more controversial things that happened with RHEL 7 was the inclusion of System D.
Yeah, that's when everybody forked RHEL off to not RHEL and made their own non-System D. Oh wait, no, that was Debian. Never mind.
Debian held up, but I think even Debian doesn't Debian have System D?
No, I forget which distro. I think it was Debian. Somebody forked Debian because they didn't want System D so badly that they forked it into their own distro that kept the old init system.
That's fine.
Yeah, tell you what it was called, but I can't remember because it hasn't been in the news lately because it probably died.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's fine. But here's the thing. Control groups were rolled in as a core component in System D. Like, you need control groups to run System D. Because System D, what it does is when it fires it up, it puts everything in its own control group.
Of course, J-Scar remembers the name of the distro. It was Dev1.
Yeah, there you go. And then with C groups, what you can do is a C group can have child C groups as well. So when you look at a System D box, you actually have a couple of top-level slices. You've got user, system. On a RHEL box, you've got user and system and machines. Those are the 3 default ones. User is where all user space stuff lands. Well, so when you log in, you're given your own C group under the user top level slice. You'll see things called scopes. Those are also part of System D and part of C group. But every single user has their own individual C group. So as a system administrator, I can put settings on user C groups even when they're not online, so that my more important users, can, in theory, have more processing power.
Users are all equally important.
No, they're not. The system slice is where all the services land. The classic Unix daemons. So SSH has its own C group. Cron has its own C group. Crony has its own C group. It's like Oprah. You get a C group, and you get a C group. So every single daemon run on the machine gets its own C group. And in the unit file, you can actually set the C group settings in there for CPU, memory, and disk. Right?
Now, when you're defining these C groups, you don't have to get into the minutia of how much percent each and every one of these services get, right? So it's like I have 100% of a pie. I don't have to divide that pie up into percentages that equal 100 based on how many services I'm running, right? It's smart enough to handle that for you?
You don't have to do that. What you generally do, unless you use quotas, if you use shares. So a RHEL 7 system with C groups, a RHEL 7 system out of the box is automatically going to be more resistant to a single process or a single user hogging everything, because every single process running on that box is in a C group that has a share setting. So naturally, every single C group is going to have some slice of the CPU pies. Because, again, most systems, remember, don't even have just one pie. They have multiple pies.
Right.
God, I'm going to just go binge eat after this.
All kinds of pies.
Right. And most of the time what you do is you don't go and tweak everything. What you usually do is, if you have a problem child, you turn his or her settings down. Or if you have something that's more important, you turn those settings up.
Okay, that makes sense. And again, that's not like minutia. It's more like you have X number of shares, and those shares are sort of figured out on based on the system, not based on the number of processes or something like that.
Let's take a system that's an Oracle database.
Why has it always got to be Oracle? Please. Yes, it, please.
Right? And let's say, let's take some third-party app. Let's take XYZ app. And it's got a module that fires off, and it's a critical calculation. It calculates payroll. What you could do is you could give that 4096 shares, that module. And when it's not running, it don't care. But when it fires up, if the system's under load, it will get 4 times as much processor time as everything else on the system, to make sure that it can run its job efficiently while the system's under load, right? So that'll still give everything else on the system the processor time it needs. Now, if this job fires off and it's burning 70% of the available CPU and other stuff isn't even closing that gap, it doesn't matter, right? But if somebody else starts kicking off jobs and everything, in the end, if all the processors are screaming at 100%, that critical job will still have 4 times as much CPU time as everything else. So what you do with shares is you do it with quota too, right? Make sure that this process always is capped, always capped at that. You think about it beforehand, and then when the system is in that underload state, it's in a happy place. That's how you think about CPU shares. And disk works in a similar manner, by the way. The I/O controller. You need to make sure that you're using the right I/O scheduler. You need to be using I think it's the CRQ, or is that the acronym from the Expanse episode I just watched? Close range. Yeah. But it's the one that they're one of the schedulers, and I talk about it in my blog. One of the schedulers actually allows you to use the control groups, but if you're using like the deadline IO scheduler, it doesn't work. So that's where you got to be aware of using the proper IO scheduler. Memory. So on Linux, you've got the OOM killer, right?
Yep.
When a
everybody's
Linux
favorite message to find.
Everybody's favorite thing. So on a Linux system, when it's out of memory and a process tries to allocate more memory, the OOM killer will try and kill something else to make room. And it does this via there's basically a weighting system. You can set the priority of processes, but you can proactively stop OOM killer from taking things out like your database or stuff like that by wrapping memory control groups around either application or user sessions. That way, if that session ever runs out of its own memory that the C group has been given, the OOM killer will only kill crap in that session. So if I limit Nate, you to 2 gig, and you start running too much stuff, it won't OOM Jason's porn session that he's watching.
640K is all I'll ever need.
Okay, then that's what you're gonna get. it'll just kill stuff inside of your session.
Yeah, don't mess up my porn. What the hell?
Right,
it's important
that's a
stuff.
Critical application.
It's important stuff.
And it's killer, damn it, killer.
Right. Yeah. So the memory controller basically is a way to target killer inside of specific C groups rather than let me pick a random process on the system that maybe I didn't really want killed.
Like your database or your SSH,
Right. And actually, with killer, if it runs, some people try and get around that by setting the don't kill me variable on everything. But then if killer can kill something,
you just run out of memory.
The system just kernel panics and then everybody loses. So the memory C group controller can help prevent that. Now, one of the nifty controllers that I like is available properly available in CGroups version 2. CGroup v2 on the Red Hat side appeared in RHEL 8. The redesign, because what happened with CGroups, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but the original CGroup hierarchies and things like that, they were really over-engineered in a lot of ways. Like, you could do really crazy things, but people realized, wow, CGroups are actually, there's almost too many options and too many ways that you can do things to really screw yourself up. We don't need them to be this complicated. So V2 was an attempt to redesign and simplify the hierarchies and make things a little more straightforward and easy. And on the Red Hat side, full version 2 support, I think became a reality in RHEL 8.3. And by support, here's what I mean. The controllers have always been in the kernel. To me, a supported C group controller means you can control it using systemd, whether that's with the systemctl commands to do stuff on the fly or by using the unit files. And so today, the most useful supporters that actually support it directly via systemd are CPU memory IO, and then one called CPU set. And CPU set's really cool for customers or users who are doing like very latency sensitive applications. What you can do, and you see this a lot in financial and scientific sectors, you can say, okay, I've got this server, and it's got 4 physical CPU boards, and each board has 8 cores or whatever the hell the kids are putting in the computers these days, right? And you can set up groups of cores in CPU sets. Like maybe you're using a single core for some common administrative tasks, but you're using 6 cores over here for your stock trading application that needs like almost instantaneous turnaround of the transactions. Jason watching porn should not touch those cores, right? We shouldn't multitask into those cores with anything else.
We've already established how important that is, though.
Touching those cores is a totally different type of porn. We don't like that.
Yeah, so maybe Jason gets his own CPU set, his own core that his stuff runs on. And so by setting up a CPU set and putting stuff in that C group, that means that those processes are guaranteed to run on those cores. And you can basically make it so nothing else is run on those cores. So what a lot of the financial guys and the low latency apps do is they'll reserve a core or two for the OS stuff. Like there's where SSH goes, there's where the backup utility goes, all this other shit. But most of the cores are in the CPU set that's doing the financial trading or the latency sensitive application. And it's a thing of beauty. And you can actually play some pretty cool games with this. If you've got a system that supports NUMA, where you can set your CPU sets up so that you've got the processes running in this, together in the same NUMA node, so that the data and the process are right. They don't have to cross any of the other bridges. The memory and the CPU are communicating directly because you've isolated via NUMA nodes. And if you're really nerdy, you look up the interrupts on your network card and you put your applications in the same NUMA nodes where that network interface is, so that the shit goes right through the network controller that way. And you're crossing fewer lanes and it's a faster transaction.
Well, they have these crazy network cards that do shared memory, so that drops the packets directly in, bypasses the kernel entirely, drops it right into shared memory, so that your application can just touch that memory directly without having to ever deal with the interrupts.
That is fantastic. So when you're talking about performance and tuning and setting up and really turning knobs, CGroups today are one way to get deep into that on a Linux machine. And again, it's not just Red Hat. Every modern Linux distro that's running systemd has CGroups, and you're using them whether you even realize it or not. Haven't even really touched containers, but CGroups are a core component of containers, where you take a process, you isolate it in its own container with all the dependencies for the application. It's in its own namespace, so it thinks it's on its own little computer. And on a Red Hat system, it's also using SE Linux for security isolation. But CGroups are a core component for container applications. And in fact, if you look on OpenShift, and I'm assuming other Kubernetes do the same with their UIs, you can actually set up your CPU shares and stuff in the UI. That's just using CGroups. But give this container, this many slices.
Containers are getting more like virtual machines every day.
A little bit, but that's all using CGroups under the hood.
It's pretty cool,
right?
Pretty cool. Makes it, I mean, this is more of a container statement than a CGroup statement, but it really takes, that overhead away from the isolation you got with the virtual machines, and puts them to like a process level, right? Where CGroups are very much, right? You can take a process and say you only get this much CPU, this much memory, or based on shares or quotas or whatever.
And that's how containers are doing it.
That is exactly how containers are doing it.
Using the CGroups for that.
Yeah. And then namespaces, which aren't really what we're talking about right now, but they're sort of add sort of some of the security boundaries, correct?
Yeah, namespaces basically isolate. How's a good way of putting it? You know how when we do our CTF and you're like all happy and giddy because the container you fired up looks like its own little computer?
Yeah.
That's what namespaces are doing.
Yeah.
It only it only sees the underlying file system stuff that you elect to expose to it.
You're essentially natting those resources.
Yeah. So that's the actual magic of namespaces. And in some ways, namespaces are a little more magical than C groups in a lot of ways. And I hate to say that, but the namespaces are why you appear to be in your own tiny little miniature computer.
Yep. So Jason, I don't know what's up, but we seem to have lost your camera. It says your internet is too slow.
I can see me just fine, so I don't know why.
Tell your kids to stop streaming all the games.
Okay.
Anyway, we can live with that. All right. So, did you cover all the topics you wanted, or is there more to talk about here?
I feel like I rambled through my bullet points.
That's good.
With some cool commentary from you guys, but what I would say to our listeners, if you're interested in reading more, we always have the show notes on the website where the podcast lives. And if you Google Iron Sysadmin, because I don't remember the friggin' URL. Who remembers URLs anymore? You just Google something.
It's really difficult. It's ironsysadmin.com.
Okay, so ironsysadmin.com. If you go there and you look for the show notes for this episode, what you'll see is in the notes, I've got a couple of links there, right? I wrote a whole blog series on Red Hat's Technical Account Manager blog, World Domination with CGroups, where I walk through each controller, and some of them are kind of fun. Like, I have pictures of my daughter's stuffed duck, Mr. Quackers, for when I did the I/O controller. I mean, it's a lot of fun. But that a lot of people have given me, have said very nice things about that series. So, at the risk of making my ego swell, yay, Jason! give it a read. I'm told it's pretty good.
Yeah, I've heard. I've heard the same.
I've linked to the Rel 8 docs, which is where we teach our customers, these are the official documentation on managing, monitoring processes. And then I know this sounds like it could be a really ridiculous thing to point someone at, but the C group kernel docs are actually really well done. They're very readable, and they won't put you to sleep, and they cover every single aspect of control groups.
But do they have any stuffed ducks in them?
There's no ducks, sadly, but they've got great technical information that, again, I feel is very readable for someone even of a beginner nerd level. They don't assume you're a programmer, so that's kind of cool. And so I've linked the kernel docs for both version 1 and version 2. And then there's a really cool comic. Jason turned me on to this today. Wizard Zines. She does comics on various technical topics, and her container comic has a piece on C groups, and there's a one panel on it that's delightful. I'm like, she basically is doing my blogging, but it's with a cartoon, and it's kind of cool.
With a single page cartoon. It's pretty crazy.
They're surprisingly dense with information, and incredibly easy to read and understand.
There was I noticed she had one on how the root servers work, how the DNS root servers work. Who makes a comic about that? She does.
I still don't understand that.
Yeah, no one does.
No one does. So, but what I would say is that some of the more frustrating problems in IT are performance problems. I've always hated them because they can be very difficult to diagnose, and sometimes you just don't really feel like you have the tools to solve performance problems. And if you get to know control groups, you've got some new tools in your belt that can really help you in that. Especially if you're trying to manage systems with lots of contention. And, again, most of us are managing systems that are using System D.
Yep.
You've already got C groups. The default C group configuration is pretty sane, but you can adjust it for what your users are looking for. And that's a pretty handy thing.
Awesome.
But, yeah. So hopefully somebody learned something tonight.
I hope so. All right. So, if anybody's interested in learning more about C groups, first of all, check out the show notes. There's lots of documentation in there. You can always reach out to us if you have any specific questions about C groups. And if anybody's really, truly interested in going through this lab that Mark has talked about, and I'm volunteering Mark here because I know he's agreed to this in the past, so that's binding, man. You are now stuck with this if anyone wants to do this. We were trying to figure out how we could do these labs through like a live stream of some sort. If anybody's interested in seeing that or even participating in that, let us know, and we'll put the effort into trying to take it that last mile to really get this worked out.
What we'd probably just do is we would probably just have a specific time and date, and we could just use Gmeet. We're allowed to use Gmeet for non-work related stuff.
We could do Gmeet, or we could use the Discord voice and video. Discord.
Yeah, whatever.
Discord.
We would basically either ask people to sign up or even just show up on time for the event. But I'd like some sort of a sign up so that we know that people are committing to come.
Yeah. So if you guys are interested in that, please let us know. Either reach out. Twitter,
let us know.
There he goes.
You knew you weren't going to get away with that, Elsa.
There he goes.
There he goes. There he goes. Although I finally watched Encanto over the weekend.
Catchy songs, right?
Yeah, we ain't talking about Bruno, man.
Catchy songs.
Although I will die on the hill that Surface Pressure is a better song than We Don't Talk About Bruno.
Oh yes, that is a very good song.
Who this Bruno is? My kids are old enough that I don't watch that stuff anymore, so I've lost touch and I don't know who Bruno is.
The sad thing is, so are Mark's kids, and that didn't stop him.
Sad. So many people were raving about the movie, and I'm like,
it's a good movie.
I like Disney movies. I've got Disney Plus. It's there. Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote the music, and he's a national treasure. Like, it was just a matter of putting aside the time to watch it.
That's the same person that did that.
Hamilton.
Hamilton, yeah, that everybody was raving about.
And Moana.
And you know what? You hear both Moana and Hamilton, the style in the music from Encanto. At least I noticed it. Anyway,
national treasure.
That's not anything about CGroups, but we're about to finish up the conversation about CGroups. So thank you, folks, for listening to our little rambling here about CGroups. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. We're going to go to a break. If you're listening to the first half of the show and you want to hear our housekeeping and chat and news, please tune in to the second half of the show. It should be listed in your podcasting app as the B version of episode 116.
B-sides Delaware.
B-sides Iron Sysadmin is kind of what this turns into. And if you don't tune in for that, I just want to say thanks for listening. And if you want to support the show, check out Patreon, check out IronSysadmin.com. Really, that's the place to find all the ways that you can support us. And we're going to go to a break. So let me find the scene and find the button. Here's the break scene. Here we go. All right, we'll be back in a few,
folks.
Press
the button, Frank.
Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysAdmin. And thank you.
Push the button, Frank.
All right, folks, we're back. We had a fun little break. We talked about cryptocurrency and NFTs. We have some stuff coming up in the news that are maybe kind of related. Jason talked about being an idea guy. It was fun.
I'm a millionaire in my head.
So, folks, if you're tuning in to this part of the show and have not heard the first part of the show in which we talked about CGroups, you should go back and listen to episode 116A, which should be right before this one, if I posted it properly, and if your podcast reader got them in the right order. But go do that, because it was a good talk. CGroups are fun. Damn it. What?
If you're a millionaire in your head, why don't you just go all the way to billionaire?
Wow, that was off.
But that's a little greedy.
They're just trying to continue the same conversation we were having in between my statements about the show.
Yeah.
Do you hear something, Mark?
Yeah, are we on a podcast
No,
or
not
really?
really. There's some maybe it's
Background
a
noise?
stink bug. I don't know.
We could probably get rid of that in post.
Yeah.
It sounds like a stink bug.
Yeah,
Or
right.
Let the editor know he has to remove that noise in the post.
All right, so welcome to the part of the show where we heckle each other and we try to get some housekeeping done, and then we talk about some fun things, and then we cover the news. So I'm going to start with the housekeeping stuff, and that is announcements. I don't know that we have many things in the way of announcements, except our usual Patreon update. The number and amounts of patrons have not changed since our last show, but I always pay you guys a bit of homage by simply reading your names right now.
Yeah,
so I'm going to do that.
that's not a complaint that it hasn't changed, by the way.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome that you guys are all still patrons. We haven't lost any patrons. We haven't gained any. It's fine. We're good. All right. So, Zed Thor, name pending 197, Jeremy, Aranami, Andrew, Chatro, Bruce, Robert, Matt, David, Solemn with a 0 and a 3 in it, Trooper-ish, Linux, Sys 666, Gimpy B, Mark with a K, The Mentor, John the Nice Guy, Mark with a C, Julius, Andy, Jay, Charles, and 22532. Thank you all for being patrons. To your old friend.
And I want to know if Linux Sys 666 uses control groups and what he or she thinks about them.
You're right. We should find out. Do you use control groups? I mean, if they're on a proper version of RHEL, they do. Even if they don't know it.
It's like the dishwasher. It's like the dish detergent. You're soaking in it. What? Old commercial from my youth.
Palmolive.
Palmolive, right?
Yeah. I'm soaking in it. There was also a series of commercials for the video game Blood, which that was their tagline.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right?
That's awesome.
A little darker than the dish soap commercial.
Dank!
Right. And I wanted to give you guys a quick update. We talked last time on the show that some of you who are in the right tiers on Patreon should be receiving merch.
The right tiers.
The right. That's the wrong kind of tiers.
Oh, okay.
Unless, I don't know, they don't want to spend the money on the show, in which case maybe it's tiers, but it's not that much money. So anyway, 3 of you should be, or should maybe already have received Iron Sysadmin t-shirts from Patreon. I'd love to hear from you. What are the shirts like? How do they look? Whatever. I don't have one because it's not like Patreon sent me one when I signed up for the thing. I already have my own Teespring Iron Sysadmin shirt, so I don't need another one. But anyway, Matt, Mark with a K, and Aranami. I hope you guys get your shirts. If you don't get them, let me know. Some of them just sent earlier this week, and some of them sent last month, so those should be out already. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. Maybe post a picture on Twitter or wherever you like to social media stuff of your shirt. Even if you want to post a picture of you wearing your shirt, that's fine too. Whatever you're comfortable with, we'd love to see them. So let us know if you got them.
Trying to social engineer you.
That's it. Make sure there's
nudes.
Make sure there's a clear image of your thumbprint and your social security card when you do so.
And tag the picture with your mother's maiden name and your favorite bat.
Yeah, right. And can you complete this survey for me? That asks what street you grew up on and what your favorite color is. What color
Blue,
your eyes
no
are.
red.
That's hilarious. Anyway, so yeah.
And your hacker name is your mother's maiden name followed by the last 4 of your social.
Yep. So if you want to buy merch instead of getting it through Patreon, you can just go to teespring.com/stores/ironsysadmin, order yourself a t-shirt. They're good. I still have mine. I ordered it like 3 years ago, and it's holding up well and hasn't fallen apart or anything. It's a little faded as black t-shirts become over the years. How's yours holding up, Jason? Do you still wear it frequently?
Well, it's in the rotation. See,
so you see it once every 3 months.
All of the shirts go into a rotation and wear them and then they rotate back out.
We've talked about the stack on the past in past shows.
Like once every, I think we're up to like 4 months now or so before I see the same shirt.
Once every 4 months you see the same shirt. So
it's FIFO.
Yes.
I have my favorites that are more like LIFO. Like this is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if this is on the top of the stack, I pop the stack. It's a stack, not a queue with my favorite shirts.
Yeah,
and then when all my favorite shirts are dirty, I then go.
And you go to your second favorite shirts.
Back in the before times, there were times when I popped the queue, for special events. But
it must be this shirt. Specialty. It's when the nice T-shirts come out.
This shirt, this is one of my bigger shirts, so it fits me more comfortably when I'm like in a fat mood. That's as complicated as that is.
Hey, that's fine. All is well. I just use drawers to put my shirts in.
Yeah, mine are in drawers, but
And I pull out a shirt that seems fitting for wherever I'm going or whatever I'm doing. Like usually for a normal workday, I'm wearing a shirt that probably features a Red Hat logo on it.
Most of mine are in drawers, but I think this summer I'm going to have to sit down and woodwork myself a queue.
Yeah, you need
because the drawers are just not enough anymore.
You need like a big rail system that you pop them in at one end, and they like at the grocery store when you pull out the can of concentrate orange juice and the next one pops down behind it. You need something like that for shirts.
Think of like a U-shaped thing. I put the shirts in here and I pull them off here.
Yeah, that's perfect.
They kind of.
It would have to be spring loaded for that to work, though. It would have to have pressure and push them through so they come out the other side. Yeah, good idea.
You don't necessarily need pressure.
You could gravity feed it if it's tall on one side and short on the other, right? These are important problems we're solving here, folks. Important problems.
We'll have to collaborate.
All right, I think we've successfully transitioned into the part of the show where we just chat about mindless things. And the mindless thing I've been doing lately is I've been playing a lot of Valheim. Now, Valheim's not new. I think they just celebrated a year, right? If I remember correctly. A little over a year.
Yes.
Valheim is a game that is in early access, which also means it is incomplete. We get new content and features frequently. Maybe not frequently, but frequently enough, right? Which is kind of cool.
Not as frequently as some people would like.
Yep. But if you play slowly enough, that's really not a big deal, and that's kind of what we've been doing. Mark and I get together with some coworkers once a week, and we play Valheim. Unfortunately, I miss that frequently enough because it happens to be the same the same night that my daughter has gymnastics. But it is what it is. I'm just looking at what Jason is adding to the notes right now. Oh, he's okay. You can add your comment when I get to that part.
I will.
But anyway, so I have played plenty of Valheim in the last year, right? But for some reason, so I took off last week for a couple reasons, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for some
Valheim in the past year, I don't know about plenty.
Well, plenty enough, or like that I was familiar enough with the game that it wasn't like new and that I was just itching to play it. But for some reason, on the week that I was off, I fired up Valheim and just got completely sucked into it. I played it almost nonstop the whole week I was off, even though I had this whole list of things I was going to do while I was off. But you know what? It was fun, and they call it personal time off for a reason, right? So I had a good time playing Valheim. And
never apologize for spending your PTO playing a video game.
I've taken time off for game launches. I'm still kind of hooked on it. Like if we weren't doing the show right now, I'd be playing Valheim. I figured out
how to. You're supposed to take time off for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, right. I finally figured out how to make beehives.
Make it guilt-free.
Which is good. Now I can make mead in the game, or I could once I have enough honey.
As soon as Valve allows me to buy my Steam Deck, I too will be playing these games.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm on the list. I'm on the list for a Steam Deck.
You can't play Valheim on Mac?
Unless they've changed it recently. There's no Mac version now.
That's a shame.
Does Mac OS do Proton or no?
Does Mac OS do Proton?
So what you can do with Steam is you can, on Linux, it uses the Proton libraries. I don't know.
Oh, no, not as...
Linux 86.
Not as far as I know. No.
Okay.
No. I honestly, I don't know that I have a ton of time to do it anyway. But
Well,
you know.
yeah. Even if you have the Steam Deck.
Well, Steam Deck's portable, so and it's. I'm hoping it's similar to Switch, where I can just like turn it off and it suspends everything, because then I can play it, in snapshots here and there.
All right, that's reasonable.
Well, the nice thing about Valheim is that it's not like you have to reach a point to save like some games do. If you need to stop the game, you can just log out wherever. It's not like the world continues and will kill you or something while you're absent. As long as you close the game out, you're safe.
Yeah, and if you're playing single player, then that's even better.
Yeah, I mean, even if you have so I set up a server when I started tinkering with it because I had this idea that my kids might want to play it, and they do actually. So they started playing it too the week that I was off. But even the server does not continue, right? Once all the players log out, it's like the server suspends, or time in the machine suspends, right? So it's not like the world continues to do things and you will die while you're gone or something. So it's nice like that. So anyway, but yeah, it makes it easy enough that you can do that without having a system that'll suspend for you. But the other thing I did last week is the reason I took off was one, because it's the week of my birthday. And to be honest, I usually have way too much PTO at the end of the year anyway. So I figured, why the hell not take the week of my birthday off? Because it also falls on the week where I watch an off-road race based in California called the King of the Hammers, which is, yes, an off-road race sounds like it would just be a one-day event, but it's not. It's a week-long thing where they have qualifying rounds and they have 3 different events at the end of the week. And it's actually great. Jason looks disappointed.
I got excited because I saw this in the notes and I Googled it. There's no hammers.
There's no
hammers. I didn't see a single hammer. There were no hammers.
There are hammers, but not in the sense.
It was not exciting.
Not in the sense that you're expecting. See,
I was thinking so I mean, we were talking about Valheim before too, and I was thinking here Vikings and hammers and But
there's Vikings in Valheim.
It's a bunch of Jeeps.
Yeah.
A bunch of Jeeps thinking that they could just run over everything.
So the King of the Hammers is based in Johnson Valley, California. And I've probably talked about this on the show before, honestly, because it happens every year and I watch it every year and I'm completely immersed in it every year.
I don't remember.
But
I tune it out, so
there's trails they refer to as the Hammers. Originally it was just 2. There were Jack and Sledgehammer. And then they added Clawhammer. So this was collectively the Hammers Trails. And they decided, for a case of beer, a bunch of guys went out to see who could get through all 3 trails the fastest. And that happened, it was 15 years ago or something. And it has grown into this enormous off-road event. It is, some people refer to it as the Burning Man of the off-road world, because 10,000 people go out into the desert, because this is a desert in California. And they basically build a city out of RVs, and they have power, and they have cell service, and they have internet, and everything. And they broadcast a freaking production race from the middle of the desert so that people like me on the wrong coast can watch it on their TV in their office while they're off for the week. It's really, personally, I'm always awed by the technology that must go into getting this done from a bunch of gearheads. Face it, these are a bunch of gearheads that go out into the desert and they're able to do all this stuff. And we live in the future, folks. It's amazing. I think it's amazing. And I get to watch,
now I know.
Crazy purpose-built off-road rigs that can go fast in the desert, 120 miles fast, 120 miles per hour fast, and crawl over rocks that are bigger than most people's cars.
So this is how my wife feels when I'm talking about a computer game to her. now I know.
You're just involved in the wrong sport,
what?
Mark. It's awesome.
I just woke up. What happened?
There is a listener somewhere who's like, yes, that's awesome. I'm going to go watch King of the Hammers next year. And if that's true, I succeed.
There's no hammers.
Do I have to go back to the beginning of the explanation? So look, there's these trails.
I already had my nap.
There's these trails in California. They're called...
I'm glad you enjoyed your PTO and happy birthday and your race.
I thought you were looking a little grayer.
Yeah, well, people watching the live stream or the video will notice that I've decided to start growing in a beard this year, and it came in a lot more gray than it did the last time I grew it. It's still not very gray, but there's gray in the
No, it looks fine.
beard here and on the sides. It's definitely gray. There's gray now.
Distinguished.
Distinguished. Yeah, I don't mind it. It looks fine. I'm not one of those people that's weird about gray hair.
I better not be one of those people who's weird about gray hair, or I'd be in trouble.
Yeah, right.
You only have a few gray hairs. Most of it's white.
That's 'cause I only have a few.
Most of it's white. The Just for Men ain't working, Mark.
He's spicy tonight.
I don't want to go down another rabbit hole, but at least this one is computer related. So
this scotch is really good, I gotta say.
And it's kind of funny.
Glad.
It's kind of funny, right? So my dad volunteers for the local fire company, and he writes me a text message. He's like, "Hey, do you have any spare computers? The one at the fire company died." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I got."
This cannot end well.
I'm like, "I have this old Dell computer, but it has Linux on it. I don't have Windows for it because why would I, right? I don't think I've bought a copy of Windows ever, except the ones that came with computers. And this was a hand-me-down computer that I got from
so you have the OEM. You have Windows that shipped with the machine.
No, not even, because I had wiped it and put Fedora on it years ago. I don't have this machine. I don't even have the install discs for or anything. It's an older Dell. I could theoretically go download it. It's got the code on there. But to be honest, I didn't want to, right? But he's like, well, it just needs a web browser. I'm like, well, I can do that on Linux. And he's like, but how do you open a web browser on Linux? I'm like, do you really think Linux is still just the command line? Because I think that's what he thought. Thought like he'd be using links or something. So I'm like, no, it's got a full UI that rivals Windows and Mac. Like, it is a fully featured desktop environment. You'll be fine. He's like, okay, cool. So I wiped the thing out. I put Fedora 35 on it. I let him know. And while I'm watching my race, by the way, this was Saturday, the day of the main event of the race. I'm doing all this in the living room on the floor. My wife loves it. So that evening he comes down, he picks the thing up, and I'm like, all right, it's a tower. It doesn't have Wi-Fi. You're going to have to plug it in Ethernet. He's like, yeah, that's fine. It's right next to the cable modem. They're going to plug it right into the cable modem. I'm like, oh, great. They have a Windows machine currently plugged right into the cable modem. This scares me. At least the Linux machine is probably safer. So I get him all set up, and he takes it up to the fire company. He writes me, no lie, like 15 minutes later, it needs Wi-Fi. They don't. It's the cable modem is only connected via Wi-Fi, and it's a room or two over. And trying to get a cable to it is almost impossible. I guess there's cement walls or something. I'm like, he's like, I ordered a part to fix their computer online. We're gonna have we'll have it fixed in a couple of days. I'm like, well, then why did I just spend 3 hours getting this damn machine up and running when you could have ordered a freaking? So now I have another machine here, freshly installed with Fedora 35, that I can do something more productive with, I suppose. Yeah, it's more of a rant than a story, I guess. Never look a gift computer in the mouth.
I think you learned a lesson about trying to do something nice.
I think I did. I'll do it again. Next time someone asks me, I'll be like, yeah, I can do that. And I'll get shot in the foot again. But anyway, if anybody needs a Dell Optiplex running Fedora 35, let me know.
No, I'm good.
All right, and that's...
computers already.
And that's, yeah, right. Me too. This one was in my basement when I reinstalled it. So, all right. Mark, what are you up to?
Yeah. So, The Expanse, man, the series, the TV series finished up, and it was amazing. I don't know if you've caught up.
I have.
But, really well done. And I'd always heard so much about the books, so it kind of inspired me. I ordered the first 3. They're a good read. It's not 100% track. It doesn't track 100% with the show.
Never does.
But he's a good writer, and pretty cool. And what I actually am doing is when the show first came out, I don't remember consistently watching it because it wasn't always on Amazon. Like the first couple of seasons were, I think, on Sci-Fi or whatever.
It's possible.
And I think it ran before I had Amazon Prime on all my streaming stuff. So I think I used to catch it, like I'd TiVo it and then try to catch it. And I the point is I'm rewatching it from the beginning. And I'm like, I don't remember seeing all this.
See, I did watch it from the beginning. The problem was there was enough gap because I watched the first season and then I didn't watch for like a year or two. Then I caught back up with the second season. I'm like, I don't remember what happened. Maybe that's what happened to you because it is a very dense. Like, there's a lot that goes on in those episodes.
What's kind of happening is I'm watching some Expanse and then I'll read the books. So I'm kind of leapfrogging a little bit, but I'm kind of staying a lot. Like the first book is Leviathan Wakes, and that's like the first season, the first season is like 60% or 70% of Leviathan Wakes. So I'm kind of doing the series in the book. I've got the first 3 books. I'm kind of doing the series of the books in parallel, and my understanding is the books actually go beyond the series. I don't know that 100%.
Yeah,
that's what I think happened.
Yeah, well, the series got canceled, so
is that what happened?
The series got canceled, which kind of sucks. Look, it got to zombies, okay, and that was wonderful, but then they canceled it.
Yeah,
I thought books apparently go a lot further.
I thought the last season left on something of a cliffhanger. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, that was amazing," and now it's over. I'm like, but did I miss something? Because it did not seem to finish the story.
I think it did okay with the story and the system. I think on the zombie planet, it was a hell of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, yes. You never found out what happened there.
And that one guy on the planet, like, you're done. You know, I'm done taking orders from you or whatever.
Yeah, and then it's just like, goodbye, season's over. What?
You know, and you got Holden snuggling with Naomi, and that was all fine. You know, on the Ross and the Rossi rocked on, right? So, but so I'm kind of excited about being able to pursue the story in the books more and see where it goes.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to get the books now to finish it.
Yeah.
To really finish it, because I really felt the last season was shorter than the others, which was a disappointment.
It was
like 6 episodes or something instead of the 12 or whatever. They were good. But that whole thing about the planet with the kid that came back from the dead, they never explained how the hell that worked. They never explained why it was significant. They never explained why they showed us any of that.
Well, it worked with alien technical magic. Yeah. That's how it worked. And I'm sure that the books... Jason, have you read the whole series?
No, it's on my list of things to read. I just read excerpts about how the books go further than the TV show and it got canceled and everything else. But yeah, I've heard it's amazing hard sci-fi.
So I'm assuming that we're going to learn more about, we'll call them the zombies, right? We'll learn more about the zombie situation.
And the dogs. The zombie dogs.
Right. The zombie dogs, yeah. So that's kind of cool. The other thing is the PS5, even though I've got a hell of a backlog already, I made the critical error of downloading Destiny 2 because they've got a free-to-play aspect of it. Yeah. And I've already ordered the expansion that's coming out on the 22nd. I played a lot of Destiny 1. I played Destiny 2 on the PS4 a little bit when it launched.
Yeah, I played it a little bit on PS4. I never really got deep into it.
It was disappointing. They basically redid it, so it's more like the first one, and it's better.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So on the now PS4, PS5, like Destiny 2 is the same on both platforms essentially. So if you wanted to get back into it, you could, but it's really, I forgot how tight the gunplay and stuff is. The problem with Destiny 2, and I know this is going to happen, it's going to be sort of like an MMO. There's a lot of fear of missing out. Like, you want to log in, like, if not daily, then enough that you do, like, the weekly stuff. And you're going to get to the point where if you want to do the more, like, all the content, you need to go in with a group of players that know what they're doing. And that's like World of Warcraft raiding all over again, which is a level of bullshittery I just don't need in my life. So we'll see what happens. I might just dally in it. I'm taking some PTO the end of this month because I've got to burn some before March.
Yeah.
And the new Horizons game comes out right before Destiny. So I'm going to be doing some gaming. And I have to finish Ghost of Tsushima on the PS5.
I don't know if other people get like this, but I feel really bad about not playing No Man's Sky as much as I was. Because I was really into that before I started getting into Valheim. And now it's like Valheim is everything. Like I'm cheating on my game.
No, No Man's Sky is a very nice mistress because I always go back to her. Like I'll put her on the shelf. And then I'll go back to her. And I'll put her on the shelf. Then I'll go back to her. And she's always a good experience.
That's a terrible analogy. Although
Whatever.
accurate, I suppose. A willing mistress.
The Buffalo Trace has done its work. What I'm saying is don't feel bad about No Man's Sky. Oh my God. I had Jamie try out the VR the other day.
Yeah.
I had her do a couple of things, but I showed her Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades, which is this game where
You told me
the
about this.
guy, yeah, it's like hundreds and hundreds of guns and other weapons. And it's got this mode called Take and Hold, where you basically you go to system nodes and you hack into them, you smack them, and then it starts hacking them, and then the hot dog guards start attacking, and you're defending with the guns you've managed to collect.
Not the
And
hot
again,
dog
they're
guards.
they're realistic. Like if you've got like a 45, you've got to eject the cartridge, pull a new one, throw it in, slide the hammer back. I mean, the guy really tries to simulate them very accurately, but there's no human target, so you're fighting hot dogs that bleed mustard. And take and
I mean,
hold
at
is
least they don't bleed
a
ketchup
fun mode.
because then they win.
Yes, the realism on the guns is super important when you're shooting hot dogs.
Well, yeah.
Well,
No, I mean, in today's
I know,
climate,
I know.
it's
I'm being
like
funny.
it's a difficult thing, right? Guns are dangerous. You shouldn't be shooting at people. I understand all that, but in a game, even a VR game, right? It might be fun to experience that kind of thing because it's not hurting anybody, right? But you're gonna get lambasted for doing it.
I think
It's a murder simulator.
It's a creative decision he made, and honestly, it works. It's very funny.
Yeah, no,
And
I think
it's
that's a
hard,
great way
and it-
around.
and
That's
it-
a great
and
way.
It's hard because like you start and you open the case and you're like, oh, what'd the game give me? And you might get this piece of crap double-barreled shotgun that you gotta keep cracking and putting 2 rounds in at a time. And whenever you capture a hold point, you get these tokens that you can use at supply stations to buy more and better guns. So,
That when you told me about this before, it reminds me of the firearm mechanics in Half-Life Alyx, which are very realistic as well.
So the next time you come over, and you can come over just to do this, we'll have you try hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. Because I think my description doesn't really do it justice. You have to experience it, and then you're gonna buy it. Like if you like guns at all, you're gonna buy it. Just to stand in the shooting gallery and spawn whatever guns you want, it is so much fun to just rock and roll with a minigun.
Yeah.
And it feels like, again, it's not arcadish or even like Call of Duty. It's like it's he goes for as realistic as possible. He added flintlocks into it.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's cool.
it's pretty swell. But I put the VR headset on Jamie, and she enjoyed Job Simulator. I showed her Job Simulator, which is a lot of fun.
The kids love that one. I've played it a little bit, but the kids just freaking love it.
Yeah, but that's me taking time off, and I am going to play video games during some of my time off, and then do a Klondike Derby with the Scouts.
So you
that's
mentioned you mentioned No Man's Sky, and I kind of want to get back to that, but I've seen like rigs that are built to run this game because it's so absolutely intense.
No Man's Sky?
And then No Man's Sky, yeah.
Okay.
And then Nintendo announced that it's going to be running on the Switch this summer.
So No Man's
don't
Sky,
understand.
No Man's Sky in flat mode is not nearly as intensive as No Man's Sky in VR, and they are
Yeah,
almost,
no, I know that,
they're
but
almost
even in
different.
flat mode, it's pretty hefty.
They're almost different games. That's how great the experience is. Because No Man's Sky in flat mode is just like any other survival game, except you're in space. It's beautiful, right? Like the textures and stuff are beautiful. But in VR, it's done so well that you feel so much like you are a spaceman. Like it's great. It's great.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm just in flat mode.
You interact with it different.
I live in
you
flat
interact
mode.
with it a completely different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you reach over your back and grab your multi-tool to pull it off your back.
Yeah, I live in flat mode. Someday I'll be a 3D spaceman, but I'm just a flat mode guy.
You'll have to
Bring
try
up
it.
You bring up your left wrist and you tap your left wrist and it projects your inventory up in like a holographic form. They really went nuts with making the VR experience exceptional.
Yeah.
You grab the handles on your cockpit on your spaceship and throw them up, and then it's to open the cockpit.
Yeah, yeah, that's just the space flight.
There's a lot of very visceral stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm not a fan of heights. I'll go and like stand on one of my frigates, and I'm standing on the frigate's deck,
looking out into space,
with a planet hanging over my head, and the sense of scale is insane. Like you just don't. It's crazy compared to playing it on a monitor.
It really is.
Yeah. I know I feel like a Jehovah's Witness when I talk about VR, like I'm trying to convert people. But if you've never tried VR, it is an experience.
Absolutely.
So I've tried VR. I don't have a set to.
So Jason, you just need to go out and spend the $300 and your soul to buy an Oculus, and you'll be set. Your soul's not worth that much, is it?
I'm sorry. It requires Meta or Facebook or whatever the hell they're calling themselves now. And I believe my answer to that is
MetaFace.
I'm sorry. I can't. Trying to keep it PG-13. I can't respond to any of this.
No. I know exactly how you feel. That's the whole reason I brought it up. So anyway, what kind of fun things you have going on? You're done, right, Mark? You talked about PS5.
Yeah, I can be done.
Okay,
I'm done.
You're done.
Not a ton. I'm lots of work. Very, very busy with various different work items that are. Some of them are fun. Some of them are not so much fun. I've almost beat Halo Infinite. One of these days I'll beat it. I just have to sit down and actually play it. I thought I was close to the end, and I am close to the end. But as with other Halo games, the end is longer than it seems. So I'm like right there.
The end is longer on the inside?
Yeah, the end is longer on the inside.
Once you've entered the end, it's longer than you thought it was?
I just have to find time to sit down and finish it. And the past like 2 or 3 weeks, I've just been busy.
Yeah, I've played games like that, where it's like, oh man, I got like 15 minutes of gameplay left. I just killed the end boss. Oh no, there's like this whole other thing you got to do. It's 27 minutes of cinematic, and there.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to watch it, but man, I got to go get groceries. The wife's in the car already.
I need to take a shit here.
There was one of the Final Fantasy games I played. I played it for like hours and hours and hours and hours. And I'm like, oh, this game, like, I beat this huge boss. I'm like, oh, this must be the end game. Like, no, that was the beginning.
Yeah, no, you just got through the intro. This is a Final Fantasy game.
You just got through the intro. Dude. Now it's open. Like, you were on rails this entire time. Now it's open world. Have fun. And I was like,
yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay.
Giant Japanese role-playing game.
Final Fantasy 7, I think, was like that.
Well, 7 was never.
It was never truly open world. There was like there was an open map you had to travel through, but it wasn't quite open world.
I think this was 12. I'm thinking of. You were on rails for like the longest time, and then all of a sudden it was like you get through this one part. You're like, okay, open world, have fun. I'm like, oh, this game is way bigger than I thought it was.
Is that the one where the main character is female, has that sword, the gun sword, Lightning? I think her name is.
No, that's 10.
That's 10? No, that's not 10.
10-2 is Lightning, I think. X2?
I don't think so. I could have sworn it was 12. Oh, well.
No, 12?
I had it on like PS3, if I remember correctly.
It was never available for PS3. 12 is available for PS2 and PS4. I'm pretty sure... Who the heck is the main character in this? Characters... I think Vaughn might have been the main character, but it's PS2. It's been a couple years since I played this.
I found it. It's 13.
Final Fantasy 13 is the one with the
the one that I was thinking.
Oh
of.
yeah.
It's right here on my shelf. I forgot I keep them right here.
Yeah, 12 is the one I'm talking about though,
and it is on PS3.
I don't know if I played 13. I don't remember.
It was good, but I got up to a boss that I couldn't get past, and I just got so frustrated I put it down and never picked it back up again.
Yeah, because 11 I never played because that was the online one, and then there was 12 and 13. 14 was online again, and then 15 was was 15. 15 was really, really, really short. I beat that really quick, and I wasn't as impressed. Anyway, the other thing I did was fall into. I found this other game called Aground, which is kind of it's like a retro kind of thing. Like reminds you a little bit of Minecraft, and it has an interesting story, and it's sort of all over the place. And I ended up playing it on several different systems. I haven't beat it or anything because it's apparently huge, but it's been a ton of fun. So I ended up playing, like, you know, I could have been sitting playing Halo, and I was playing that instead. Whoops. But I haven't played either of them.
When your games interrupt your gameplay, it's terrible. Terrible problem to have.
Reality.
Yep. And then we're rewatching Merlin, the Merlin TV show from early 2000s.
Oh, okay.
So we watched what we binged In From the Cold, which is a new Netflix show that was on. Honestly, don't know if there's going to be a second season of it. If there was intended to be a second season of it, it was really, really good. Had a couple really good twists, and I have no idea if there's going to be a second season of it, but it was definitely worth watching. And then, you know, we were just looking for something else, and we kind of stumbled upon Merlin again, and we're like, oh, let's watch that. So we have these different shows that we kind of rotate through. Star Trek is constantly on, so I've probably seen every single Star Trek season 3 or 4, you know, 2 or 3, at least 2 or 3 times.
Star Trek: The Next Generation is like that for me.
Next Generation, I've probably seen like 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
Voyager, I've probably seen more. And then, you know, Merlin's kind of in that loop. We were watching Criminal Minds again as well. So, because there's not enough good new stuff, we just got to watch the old stuff again.
Yeah. So supposedly, and you're gonna laugh. I know you're gonna have feelings about this, but apparently, Firefly is gonna get a remake.
Yeah, Firefly is getting remade by Disney, which is going to be interesting because I've heard of some, like, well, it's all speculation now.
Yeah, it is.
But I've heard some of the changes that are going to be in it, which would make sense for Disney, which are going to make it not Firefly at all. So I'm not sure what the point is.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath. I heard about it just today, but I'm really not holding my breath.
Did you hear the news yesterday?
I don't think so. What news?
They're bringing Futurama back.
I did hear that. Hear that.
Without Bender.
Bender.
Bender's going to be in it with different voice.
Oh, different voice, right? Yeah. They said most of the original cast. I figured.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, he was. I didn't read any of the articles about it, but he was singled out as like he's not returning. So I don't know if there's something.
Is there some drama there?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, Futurama's coming back, so I'm kind of excited about that too.
I never.
That's it. My life is boring.
That's cool though. And you don't need Firefly to be remade because we have The Expanse now.
Yeah, it really is. The Expanse, The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett.
No, I'm just saying The Expanse basically was the spiritual successor to Firefly, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, it felt very similar.
Yes and no. I mean, Firefly was definitely kind of a more. I think it was funnier. Expanse is more serious.
Yeah. I just talk about the dynamic of the crew that ended up together as a family and
now
had wacky adventures.
I would love to see them take Old Man's War and turn that into a series. If you've ever read that by Scalzi,
now I gotta watch.
That would be an amazing series.
Sorry, I'm thinking about where I can stream Firefly now. You have to watch it again.
There's 18 million different services. I'm sure you can find it.
Yeah, it used to be on Netflix. I don't think it is anymore. That's where I watched it last time. Anyway.
That's Google.
Dear Google, where can I stream Firefly?
I know you can get it on Amazon. Because you could buy it. Disney Plus, Hulu apparently, or either Disney Plus or Hulu apparently has it.
Disney Plus in the U.S.? I don't think so.
That's what it says. U.S. streaming, Disney Plus and Hulu,
well, I mean,
and you can rent and buy it on Amazon, Apple TV, and Google Play.
The property is owned by Disney now. That's who is talking about the remake. So it's possible.
I have fired up Disney Plus in a web window. Firefly.
Let's see. Do you find all
You'd have to try Hulu as well, because Hulu is owned by Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah, Firefly is not on Disney Plus.
It might be just that they mean Hulu. Look, the internet told me, so it has to be true, which means that you just don't know how to use the service.
You must be wrong, Mark.
Yeah, okay. Okay. That's fine.
All right. So anyway, I think we may as well wander on into the news by hitting the button.
Push the button, Frank.
And walking our way over there. Is the Buffalo Trace making you sleepy, Mark?
Yesterday was brutal, and today at work, better, was still long.
I tell you what, today...
That's what she said.
Today was...
And the Buffalo Trace didn't help.
Today was busy for me. Like, to the point where it was showtime, and normally I'm excited for showtime, and I was like, I have to put the headset back on.
Yeah, right? That's the worst part.
I don't want to.
If you get a headset break some days,
yeah,
that's all
you
need.
I've been in this thing
now,
most of the day.
Again, for those of you who shovel poop for a living,
oh yeah, right.
Or who have a mean boss,
there could be,
whatever. Nate and I are #blessed.
There could be certainly worse things in my life than I could be back at the ISP that Jason and I worked at and hating everything.
Yeah. Right. So please don't take. There's definitely first world problems going on here. All right, kid.
Yeah, but my brain was just like, no, go either play some Valheim or stare at a wall or watch some TV because you need a break. I hope it's not coming through in the show tonight. However, you handled the main topic, which was great. All I had to do was listen. Worked out really well.
Make the occasional commentary. Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, so the first item isn't really news, but it is a pretty nasty vulnerability in Samba. The link I put in the show notes.
Use Samba?
I know some people use Samba, and this is the only reason I brought it up because yes, it is Samba. Not a lot of people use Samba, but it is rated at a 9.9, which is like bad, really bad. But you'll probably want to check out if you run anything. Like Samba 3 or 4, I think, are both affected if I'm reading the notes properly. The link I put in here is actually Red Hat's announcement on it, so it lists everything all the way back to RHEL 6, I think. No, RHEL 6 is not impacted, RHEL 7 and 8. So maybe it's just Samba 4. But you'd think I was not a TAM or something and that I hadn't read. It's the beer and the tired. I'm sorry, guys.
The CVE ratings sometimes just suck because, yeah, it's a 9.9, but it's not a remote CVE. It's local. It's a local CVE.
Yeah, but it's like
there should be a big difference. Like not 0.1. There should be a pretty big difference between the two. Yes, you can get root, but you have to have access to the box to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Jason on this one.
So, well, I needed news, so I put it in here. So if you run Samba, go read this thing. It's nasty stuff, or could be nasty
Samba,
stuff.
You get what you deserve.
But how do you feel about Samba, Mark?
I don't disagree, but you kind of get stuck with it sometimes.
Yeah, you do. And I mean, this affects certain. I mean, it's not just like I'm an admin. I've installed Samba. It affects, like in our case, it affects Red Hat Storage, which has a Samba. It has a Samba daemon in it, right? So lots of appliances that are serving
insist on using Samba.
Well, a lot of appliances that serve CIFS may be impacted. So if you run something that you connect to over CIFS, you may want to look into this CVE. Maybe not our announcement on it.
Contrarian.
But there is a fix for it, or there's a fix for it. But there's also a workaround. All you have to do
turn off all your fruit.
Around this entire problem is remove the fruit.
Yep, you remove the fruit from Samba. I don't know what the hell fruit does or why there's a module called fruit in Samba. But if you have no fruit in your Samba, maybe that's like those people that wear the fruit headdress things and dance.
Maybe
fruits. Never
See,
mind.
I think fruit would be in sangria, but
yeah. Right.
Well, maybe it's a tomato problem, whereas tomato is a fruit, but you don't put it in a fruit salad.
That's true. The tomato got jealous, decided to have a CVE of 9.9.
Maybe.
It's all the acid that's in tomatoes that make them so angry. But anyway, if you're on Samba, check out this CVE. We're going to move on. All right.
Let's talk about face space.
Yeah, right. So the next one is from The Verge. New algorithm bill could force Facebook to change how the news feed works. Now, you could argue that the thing Facebook calls a news feed is not a news feed, it's a stream of crap feed. There's no news in it. Except maybe the news that they want to propagate. But, you can argue about that all you want. But we've talked about the problem with Facebook's algorithms, or really social media's algorithms in the past. Apparently, the whistleblower that came before Congress, it was late 2020. We also talked about that on the show. I'd have to look back at which show it was, but I think it was it probably says in here. But anyway, they came before Congress and said, look, social media, Facebook specifically in this particular case, is prioritizing profit over mental health. And that's a problem, right? Not just for kids, which I think was the focus of what they were talking about, but for people in general, right? So you go to your news feed, you get a certain stream of stuff that's catered to make you click on it, right? And usually that stuff is the most atrocious stuff, the most clickbaity stuff is really what it comes down to, the stuff that's going to fire you up. And that, if you do that every day, starts to affect your outlook on the world, right? And we see it all the time on social media. There are outright insane people on social media, and it's really not good for you. It's not good for anybody, right? Well, apparently Congress heard that, and there is a bipartisan bill, which I always like to hear, although it sounds like it's more of a buzzword nowadays than anything, but a bipartisan bill. They're calling it the Social Media Nudge Act, because every act has to have an acronym. I don't know what nudge stands for. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. Probably stands for I don't know.
I can't wait until they start having logos.
Oh yeah, just like CVEs do. It has to have a name and a logo.
Yep.
But anyway, it's a thing, and you can read about it on The Verge. But basically, the concept here is that this particular act is supposed to help influence or regulate how the algorithm that feeds the news feed works. Now, I don't know
what I read.
Okay, what did you read? Because I may have misread. Again, my day has been crazy. Brain is fried.
No. I'm confused because it sounds like they're talking about two different acts in here. Because it says the Social Media Nudge Act would direct the National Science Foundation and the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to study content-neutral ways to add friction to content sharing online. Okay, cool. You're going to study it. You're not doing anything. But then later on, it says that it's talking about a different act that was introduced that I'm sure got killed because it was two Democrats that introduced it. But yeah, this act sounds like it's simply studying the impact and not actually doing anything. Am I reading this wrong?
Wouldn't that?
I don't know.
Yeah, you could be, or I could be.
It's garbage because things will just move too fast.
Well, it's it always moves faster than government.
By the time the government acts on something, Facebook will have moved on to some new thing that's no longer impacted by whatever they do.
And there's too much money at play, really.
I feel like it's really dumb that you have to pass a law or act or whatever the hell we're calling it in order to study something.
It's got to be more than that, because you're right. There's no way it's just we're going to pass an act that says we're going to study it.
Yeah, this says the Nudge Act is a good step towards fully addressing big tech overreach by empowering the NSF and the NASEM to study the addictiveness of social media platforms. From there, we can build guardrails.
Studies.
Yeah, they're going to fund a bunch of studies, and then hope later on down the road that they're going to pass a law that does something about it, I guess.
Right.
Depending on what the study comes back as.
So,
and Zuckerberg will still be an evil android.
Yeah, right. The
humans like barbecue sauce. I will display barbecue sauce on my bookshelf.
The optimist in me, which I know you shouldn't use optimism when talking about the U.S. government, says that a truly independent study is in fact the first step to, because a Facebook whistleblower coming forward and saying, look, Facebook did these internal studies and ignored them. Facebook's internal studies are probably not nearly as objective as a third-party study would be, right?
Agreed. Although having a study in Facebook that, sort of damns Facebook is kind of hilarious. Yes, I would agree that, again, doing a study, probably a great first step, but why do you have to pass a law to do that?
So here's something that I find frustrating. And I see the same type of algorithm of things going on YouTube as well. But on Facebook, I remember there used to be a setting where on your feed, you could have it show most recent items.
Yeah, not anymore.
Or most popular items. And now they've basically defaulted to where you're seeing, I feel like I see the same shit all the time with occasional new items.
Yeah.
And if you actually have you ever actually like scrolled through your feed and counted the entries and how many real entries there are before you get a sponsored entry? It's like one or two actual posts from people.
Oh yeah, it's an ad. A ton of ads. Yeah,
one or two post ad. I'm at the point where if it weren't for like the huge amount of content, like pictures and stuff I've put up and contacts with family members and old coworkers, I would nuke Facebook. Because
I gotta be honest,
Facebook,
I barely use it. If I check it once a day, it's a lot, right? Yeah. I probably could get away with closing my account out, but it's that same thing, that same little nudge, right? That same little bit where it's like, oh, but there's all these people that this is the only way I get a hold of them, right? And the effort of trying to find other ways to get a hold of that small group of people that I actually care about is just enough to make me not delete my Facebook account.
Yeah. However,
I work around the psychic damage that I get from Facebook by simply not using it frequently.
Yeah, I'm the other end of the spectrum where it's if you're only, for the people that I deal with, this is not everybody obviously, but if you have something important to get to me and I'm not on Facebook, you can find a way to get it to me.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
I'm not joining Facebook so that I can see my family post like, hey, we're having a barbecue. Like, if you want me at the barbecue, I have a phone.
But it's not email. It's not even that,
like,
though.
All
right?
of these mechanisms.
It's and to Mark's point, it's like if they shared the thing about, hey, we're having a barbecue, you might not even see it. You may not see it unless they actively go and say, Jason is invited to the barbecue, and then maybe you'll get a notification. Every day, the little Facebook icon on my phone shows up and says, oh, you've got 20 notifications. Like, okay, well, I better go see who's trying to reach out to me. 99% of those are, Mark interacted with so-and-so's post. Well, I don't care. Like, maybe I care. Maybe that post was funny. But I don't need a notification. I don't need a thing to show up on my phone that says you missed a notification. No, it's that I missed that Mark that commented on somebody else's post.
Yeah.
And Mark,
sounds like a useless platform.
Mark, you comment on lots of stuff, by the way.
That's funny because I actually have Facebook notifications like turned off. Like my phone doesn't ever show a little red number on the Facebook icon.
Maybe that's what I have to do. I never looked into doing that.
My phone never shows the Facebook icon.
Yeah, right.
We get it. You're better than us.
Yeah, we get it. We get it. Get off that damned horse before you fall.
I would like to be on that horse myself.
I thought I was beating the horse. Am I riding a horse or beating the horse? Am I riding? By beating the horse, I'm riding?
Yes.
My God.
It sounds like a bad move.
My God.
Well, you're a bad person, so there you go.
That's me. I'm horrible.
Anyway, the point is the government's going to try and regulate it. People will bitch about First Amendment without even understanding what that means.
Apparently, I misread it. The government's actually not going to try to regulate it. They're going to study whether they need to regulate it, which is even less useful than I hoped it was.
Yeah, at least they're doing something, I guess. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in 10 years when the study's finally done.
All right. So the next one comes from, what is it, Kotaku? Mark, you shared this with me. Did you actually read the whole article? Because I included it last minute when you reminded me to include it.
I mean, it wasn't a big article.
No, it really wasn't a big article.
I could hold my surprise.
Yeah, right. Hold the gas.
Well, my God, it's like a QuickTime movie from 1998.
Twitch is freaking out. I wonder
It's
if
fine
our
here.
ISP is having problems.
It's possible. Streamlabs did just give me a little ping, and then before I got back to Streamlabs to see what it's talking about, the ping went away, and I don't know what the hell it said. Anyway, probably something like your bandwidth is low. Oh my god. So
that's because you kept your Stadia turned on.
Yeah, right.
So basically, what Google is basically saying is F Stadia. We're gonna make deals with companies like Peloton to create playable experiences and shit. So if you bought a Stadia like Nate, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, right. Now I will still defend. So one, right? Like, so the one thing I was really like, I like the controllers. I've said that before. It turns out that they don't work in every game. They're not just like a generic controller like I hoped they were, right? It's like you need some sort of a weird, like they'll work for Stadia games on PC. They don't work as a general controller like I hoped they would. However, the Chromecast Ultra itself is still good. So I basically spent more than I needed to get a Chromecast Ultra. Is really what I did.
Yeah, and actually, they're not going to pull the plug anytime soon. But they're disappointed.
Yeah, but I've already written it off.
The wife, Heather Morgan, is disturbing, and
alleged crypto launderer Heather Morgan led a second life as the world's worst rapper. Laundering billions in Bitcoin may not even be the worst crime of her life.
If that's your thing and that's what you enjoy and you like and you love, like, great.
Oh yeah, there's a certain thing called passion, right? And if you have it, even if you're terrible at it, great, good on you for pursuing your passion.
Awesome. That's so more crypto people off the streets. Not that it's going to stop anybody, but that's the gist of the story.
Crypto criminals.
They look like she looks like she pulled all her videos.
But
she doesn't. Like that sounds very stereotypical of me, and I'm sorry for that. But it's not good music. It's not good music either.
Horrible music.
Says
it's so bad.
There goes the dog again. Yeah, it's so bad the dog's barking. All right, so that was entertaining. Anybody wants to make their ears hurt? Go check out RazzleCon, RazzleKhan. RazzleCon. I actually hurt my throat doing that. Sorry. Okay. And there goes the dog again.
That's the dog
all right.
Reminding you that we're probably done.
Yeah, we are done. I was just about to in the show notes. Second and fourth Thursday of every month, unless we decide not to. I think that's a show.